Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Marcus Kane had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, countless firefights in Iraq, and operations so classified they didn't officially exist. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the sound of his wife's scream echoing through their suburban home at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. The former Navy SEAL jolted awake, his combat instincts instantly activated. 20 years of military training had rewired his brain to distinguish between ordinary household noises and genuine threats. This wasn't their golden retriever knocking over a water bowl. This wasn't the old house settling. This was pure, unadulterated terror. Sarah's second scream cut through the darkness like a blade, followed by the unmistakable crash of furniture being overturned. Marcus was already moving, his bare feet silent against the hardwood floor as he reached for the Glock 19 he kept in the nightstand. Muscle memory took over, safety off, chamber checked, ready to engage. The hallway stretched before him like a tunnel of shadows. Their 8-year-old daughter Emma's bedroom door stood wide open, moonlight spilling across an empty bed with sheets thrown back in haste. His blood turned to ice. The little girl who insisted on keeping her door closed because monsters might get in had left it open. Or someone else had. Marcus moved with the fluid precision that had kept him alive in the world's most dangerous places. Each step calculated, each breath controlled. But as he approached the living room, his training couldn't suppress the father's panic clawing at his chest. 3 figures in black tactical gear stood in his living room. Professional. Organized. Definitely not random home invaders looking for jewelry and electronics. One held Sarah against the wall, a gloved hand clamped over her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her face. The second figure stood guard by the front door, and the third was holding Emma. His little girl was unconscious, her small body limp in the intruder's arms. A tiny piece of tape covered her mouth, and her blonde hair fell across her face like a curtain. She was wearing the pink unicorn pajamas he'd bought her just last week, the ones she'd begged for at Target while they shopped for school supplies. Mr. Kane. The voice came from the man holding Emma, distorted by a voice modulator, but clearly the leader. Please lower your weapon. We're not here to hurt anyone. But that could change very quickly. Marcus kept his Glock trained on the speaker, his finger resting on the trigger. Let them go. Now. A cold laugh filled the room. You're in no position to make demands. You see, Mr. Kane, you've been selected for a very special assignment. Your particular skill set is required for a job that demands discretion. I'm retired. Retirement is a luxury you no longer possess. The man gestured with Emma's unconscious form, and Marcus felt his heart stop. Your daughter is simply insurance that you'll complete this assignment with the dedication we require. Sarah made a muffled sound behind the intruder's hand, struggling against his grip. Marcus could see the bruises already forming on her wrists where she'd been restrained. His wife, the woman who taught 2nd grade and rescued stray cats, reduced to a hostage in her own home. What do you want? Marcus's voice was deadly calm, the same tone he'd used when interrogating Taliban fighters. There's a USB drive. It contains information that certain people would prefer remained buried. The drive is currently in the possession of a man named Viktor Kozlov, a Russian arms dealer operating out of a compound in Montenegro. You're going to retrieve it. And if I refuse? The man holding Emma shifted slightly, and Marcus caught sight of the syringe in his free hand. Then your daughter will disappear into a network that specializes in making children vanish without a trace. Children who are never seen again. Children whose parents spend the rest of their lives wondering if they're alive or dead. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He'd seen enough in his military career to know these weren't empty threats. Human trafficking networks operated with military precision, and once a child disappeared into that darkness, they were gone forever. You have 72 hours to retrieve the drive and deliver it to coordinates that will be texted to your phone, the leader continued. Attempt to contact law enforcement, and your daughter dies. Attempt to involve your old military contacts, and your daughter dies. Fail to complete the mission in the allotted time, and your daughter dies. Marcus's grip tightened on his weapon. He could take the shot, center mass on the leader, pivot to the door guard, then the one holding Sarah. But the risk to Emma was too high. One wrong move, one hesitation, and his little girl would pay the price. How do I know you'll keep your word? You don't. But you know what will happen if you don't try. The man holding Emma began moving toward the back door. Oh, and Mr. Kane? Don't bother trying to track us. We've been planning this for months. Every contingency has been considered. The three figures moved with practiced efficiency, disappearing into the night as quickly as they'd appeared. Sarah collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Marcus rushed to her side, but his eyes remained fixed on the spot where Emma had been taken. His phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. GPS coordinates: 42.430 4 degrees north, 19.259 4 degrees east, Montenegro. Viktor Kozlov's compound. Retrieve the drive. You have 71 hours and 45 minutes remaining. Marcus stared at the message, his mind already shifting into mission mode. But this wasn't like any operation he'd ever undertaken. This time, failure meant losing everything that mattered. Sarah looked up at him through her tears. What are we going to do? Marcus holstered his weapon and pulled out his laptop. I'm going to get our daughter back. But as he began researching Viktor Kozlov and the Montenegro compound, one question burned in his mind. How did these people know so much about him? How did they know about his military background, his address, his family's routine? This wasn't random. Someone had been watching them, studying them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And that meant this was personal. The house was too quiet, silent in a way that gnawed at Marcus's nerves, reminding him with every breath that his daughter's laughter was gone. Every corner of the home whispered memories. A stray crayon on the kitchen counter, Emma's favorite blanket tossed over the couch, the stuffed unicorn she never slept without now abandoned on the floor. It all felt like a crime scene, though no blood had been spilled. Sarah was curled on the couch, her face pale, her arms wrapped around herself as though she could stop the world from collapsing. She flinched at every vibration of Marcus's phone, every shadow that crossed the window blinds. He wanted to hold her, to tell her that it would be okay, but he didn't believe it himself. Marcus paced, his thoughts a storm. His brain wasn't wired like everyone else's. 20 years of being a Navy SEAL had conditioned him to think tactically, compartmentalize, and calculate risk like a chessboard. But this was his daughter. Emotion itched under his skin like fire. He couldn't afford a single misstep. If he treated this like a father, he'd lose her. If he treated it like a mission, maybe he had a chance. He stopped pacing. His instincts screamed at him. This wasn't coincidence. Nobody randomly kidnaps the daughter of a retired Navy SEAL to send him on a suicide mission halfway across the world. Which meant someone had studied him. Someone who knew enough about his military background, his skill set, and his family's vulnerabilities. This wasn't just about Viktor Kozlov or some USB drive. Kozlov was just the surface. The real enemy was hidden in the shadows. He sat down, opening his encrypted laptop. Years out of the service hadn't dulled his need for precaution. He ran several scramblers, spoofed his IP through 3 continents, then finally accessed black channels where chatter about Viktor Kozlov's operations often bled through from mercs and low-level operatives. The name Kozlov brought instant hits. Smuggler, arms dealer, connected with old KGB and modern-day oligarchs. Ruthless, but untouchable in Montenegro due to high-level protection and his own personal army. Not the kind of man you simply take down and walk away from. Marcus leaned back, pinching the bridge of his nose. Someone wanted him to do the impossible, which meant one thing. He was expendable. His phone buzzed again, a picture message. Emma. She was tied to a chair in a dimly lit room, eyes wide with fear as a gloved hand held a newspaper beside her face. Today's date. Proof of life. No caption was needed. Sarah broke when she saw it. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Marcus, they have her. They really have her. Marcus gritted his teeth, fury pumping through his veins. They'll regret ever touching her. Sarah looked at him, her voice trembling. But what if they don't give her back? What if they lie? What if you bring them what they want and they still? He cut her off, his voice low, dangerous. Then I make sure they never draw another breath again. All of them. The air in the room thickened. Even Sarah flinched at the cold promise in his tone. This wasn't just a father talking. This was a man forged in violence, who'd buried comrades and killed enemies in silence. Now, his mission was personal. Before leaving, Marcus moved cautiously through the house. He found a hidden tracker device lodged underneath their living room table, a professional bug, military grade. His jaw tightened. They weren't just in and out. They were watching him long before they broke in. And that meant someone close. Too close. That night, when Sarah finally passed out from exhaustion and shock, Marcus drove alone to an abandoned lot downtown, a place from his past. He opened a steel lockbox hidden beneath loose concrete in the corner of an old storage shed. Inside was the ghost of his former life. Weapons, burner phones, passports, cash, maps. A lifeline he'd sworn never to touch again. But now, his life had split into two timelines. The man who'd retired peacefully, and the man who was about to declare war. He selected what he needed, a passport under the name David Cross, a suppressed Sig Sauer P226, custom grip, a folding combat knife, SEAL standard issue, and a handful of burner phones set to international frequencies. By dawn, Marcus had booked a discreet one-way flight under his alias, leaving in less than 3 hours. He sent Sarah a final encrypted message on the home computer: stay inside. Leave the phones. Don't call the police. Trust no one but me. I'll bring her home. At the airport, blending into the faceless flow of travelers, Marcus felt an old energy thrumming inside him. He was alive in a way he hadn't been since the SEAL teams. But beneath it lurked something darker: rage. The plane lifted off, heading east. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to rest, but the image of Emma bound to that chair burned into his mind. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just preparing for war. He was preparing to become something even his enemies had whispered about, a ghost who doesn't stop until everything in his path is ash. But as the plane soared toward Montenegro, he didn't know one crucial truth. The kidnappers weren't just watching him. They were already waiting for him, expecting him to walk into their trap. And in the dimly lit hideout where Emma was imprisoned, a man stepped from the shadows and whispered into a phone call. He took the bait. Phase 2 begins now. The Montenegro landscape unfolded beneath Marcus like a war zone dressed in deceptive beauty. Rugged mountains carved dramatic silhouettes against storm clouds, while ancient villages clung to cliffsides like scars. But Marcus wasn't here for sightseeing. Every mile that passed beneath the rental car's wheels was another mile closer to his daughter. The GPS coordinates led him through winding mountain roads toward Viktor Kozlov's compound, a fortress of concrete and steel nestled in a valley that looked like God had forgotten it existed. Marcus parked 2 miles away, hidden among dense pine trees, and surveyed the target through military-grade binoculars. The compound was a nightmare of defensive architecture. 12-foot walls topped with razor wires surrounded a central mansion that looked more like a bunker than a home. Guard towers positioned at strategic intervals provided overlapping fields of fire. Motion sensors, infrared cameras, and armed patrols moved with clockwork precision. This wasn't just the home of an arms dealer. This was a military installation. Marcus counted at least 20 armed guards, all carrying automatic weapons and moving with professional discipline. These weren't thugs hired off the street. These were trained soldiers, probably former Spetsnaz or Serbian Special Forces. The kind of men who killed without hesitation and never asked questions. But as Marcus studied the compound's defenses, something nagged at him. The security was too visible, too obvious. Any competent military planner would recognize the weak points immediately. The blind spots in camera coverage, the predictable patrol routes, the single point of entry that appeared heavily defended but was actually accessible from the East Ridge. It felt like an invitation, like someone wanted him to see exactly how to get inside. His satellite phone buzzed, an encrypted message from an unknown sender. Your daughter's time is running out. The drive is in Kozlov's personal safe. 3rd floor, northeast corner. You have 48 hours remaining. Marcus stared at the message. How did they know his exact location? How did they know he was surveilling the compound right now? He'd been careful. No digital footprints, no traceable communications, no patterns that could be monitored. Unless he began a systematic sweep of his gear, his body, his vehicle. It took 20 minutes to find it. A tracking chip smaller than a dime, magnetically attached to the underside of his rental car's chassis. Professional grade, probably active since he'd picked up the vehicle at the airport. They'd been tracking his every movement. Marcus destroyed the chip, but the damage was done. They knew he was here, knew he was alone, knew exactly what he was planning. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a trap, and he was walking directly into it. But Emma's face flashed in his mind. His little girl, terrified and alone, depending on him to bring her home. Trap or no trap, he had no choice. As darkness fell, Marcus moved with the fluid silence that had made him legendary among the SEAL teams. He approached the compound from the East Ridge, exactly where the defenses appeared weakest. Every instinct screamed that this was too easy, but he pressed forward. The first guard never saw him coming. A sleeper hold, applied with surgical precision, dropped the man unconscious in seconds. Marcus dragged the body into the shadows and continued moving. The second guard was smoking a cigarette by the rear gate, his automatic rifle slung carelessly across his shoulder. Another silent takedown, another body hidden in darkness. Too easy. Definitely too easy. Marcus slipped through the rear entrance, finding himself in a service corridor that led directly toward the main building. Emergency lighting cast long shadows, and his footsteps were absorbed by thick carpeting that seemed designed to muffle sound. The building's layout matched the intelligence he'd received perfectly. 3rd floor, northeast corner. Kozlov's personal safe containing the USB drive that would supposedly buy his daughter's freedom. But as Marcus ascended the stairwell, weapon drawn and senses hyper-alert, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being herded like cattle toward slaughter. The 3rd floor corridor was empty, almost eerily quiet. Kozlov's office door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. Marcus approached with methodical caution, checking for tripwires, pressure plates, motion sensors. Nothing. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. Viktor Kozlov sat behind a massive oak desk, a glass of vodka in his hand and a smile on his weathered face. He was older than the intelligence photos suggested, maybe 65, with silver hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too much death to be surprised by anything. Mr. Marcus Kane, Kozlov said in accented English, raising his glass in mock salute. Right on time. Marcus kept his weapon trained on the arms dealer. Where's the drive? Straight to business. I respect that. Kozlov gestured toward an open safe behind his desk. It's right there. Help yourself. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. Marcus's training screamed at him to abort, to get out, to find another way. But Emma's terrified face haunted him, and 46 hours had already become 45. He moved toward the safe, his weapon never leaving Kozlov, and grabbed a small USB drive that sat alone on the top shelf. Excellent, Kozlov said, finishing his vodka. Now, before you leave, there's something you should know about that drive. Marcus paused, his finger tightening on the trigger. The information on that device, it's not about arms dealing or government corruption or any of the usual suspects. Kozlov's smile turned predatory. It's about you, Mr. Kane. Every classified mission you've ever undertaken. Every target you've eliminated. Every secret your government has buried alongside the bodies you've left in distant lands. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. That's impossible. Is it? Tell me. How do you think your kidnappers knew so much about your capabilities? How did they know exactly which buttons to press to make you dance like a puppet? Kozlov leaned back in his chair. They've been studying you for years, Mr. Kane. Ever since the Kandahar incident. Kandahar. Marcus felt his blood freeze. That mission was buried so deep it didn't officially exist. A terrorist compound eliminated with extreme prejudice. No survivors. No witnesses. No records. Except there had been a survivor. Ahmed Hassan sends his regards, Kozlov continued. The boy whose family you slaughtered in that compound 7 years ago. The 12-year-old who hid in a closet and watched you execute his father, his mother, his sisters. The room seemed to tilt. Marcus remembered the intelligence briefing. No civilians in the compound. All targets confirmed as combatants. But intelligence had been wrong before. He spent 7 years planning this revenge. Growing up, making connections, building a network dedicated to one purpose, destroying the man who destroyed his world. Kozlov stood slowly. Your daughter was never the real target, Mr. Kane. She was just bait to get you here. Marcus heard the footsteps behind him a split second too late. Multiple sets, moving with military precision. He spun around as armed figures poured through the doorway, weapons trained on him from every angle. Welcome to Montenegro, Mr. Kane, a familiar voice said from behind the tactical masks. The voice modulator was gone now, revealing a young man's accent, Middle Eastern, refined by years of education and rage. Ahmed Hassan stepped into the light, no longer the 12-year-old boy who had hidden in terror, but a man forged by vengeance and patience. Did you really think it would be that easy? Ahmed smiled. Did you really think I would just let you complete your mission and walk away with your daughter? Marcus calculated odds, distances, angles of fire. 8 armed men, all with clear shots. No cover. No escape routes. Where is she? Marcus demanded. Safe. For now. Ahmed's eyes were cold as winter. But your real education is about to begin, Mr. Kane. You're going to learn what it feels like to lose everything you love. Just like I did. The weapons trained on Marcus never wavered as Ahmed continued speaking, his voice carrying 7 years of accumulated hatred. The USB drive you just stole contains detailed records of every black operation you've ever completed. Every government you've helped destabilize. Every family you've destroyed in the name of national security. When that information goes public, you won't just lose your daughter. You'll lose your freedom, your reputation, and your life. Marcus realized with sickening clarity that he hadn't been sent here to retrieve stolen intelligence. He'd been sent here to steal it himself, making him complicit in his own destruction. But first, Ahmed said, nodding to his men, you're going to experience what it feels like to be hunted. The basement of Kozlov's compound was a monument to suffering. Concrete walls wept with moisture, and the air carried the metallic scent of old blood mixed with fear. Marcus found himself chained to a steel chair in the center of the room, his weapons confiscated, his tactical advantage reduced to 0. But his mind remained sharp, cataloging every detail that might provide an escape route. Ahmed Hassan circled him like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. Gone was any trace of the terrified boy who had witnessed his family's destruction. In his place stood a man sculpted by rage and refined by years of meticulous planning. 7 years, Ahmed said, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. 7 years I've spent learning everything about you, Marcus Kane. Your habits, your weaknesses, your pressure points. He stopped directly in front of Marcus. Do you know what I discovered? You're not the unstoppable killing machine your reputation suggests. You're just a man who learned to hide his fear better than most. Marcus tested the chains binding his wrists. Military grade, probably titanium alloy. No give, no weak points. But chains were only as strong as what they were anchored to. Where's my daughter? Ahmed laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Still thinking like a father instead of a soldier. That's your first mistake. He gestured to one of his men, who brought over a tablet computer. Let me show you something. The screen flickered to life, showing Emma in the same dimly lit room from the photograph. But now she was awake, her eyes red from crying, calling out for her daddy in a voice that shattered Marcus's composure like glass. "She's beautiful," Ahmed said, watching Marcus's reaction with satisfaction. "Innocent, just like my sister Fatima was. Do you remember her, Mr. Kane? 8 years old, hiding behind our mother when you kicked down our door." The Kandahar mission flashed through Marcus's memory, a terrorist safe house, multiple targets confirmed, orders to eliminate all combatants with extreme prejudice. But the intelligence had been wrong. So terribly, catastrophically wrong. "I remember," Marcus said quietly. "Do you? Do you remember the sound she made when your bullet found her? Do you remember how our mother tried to shield her body with her own?" Ahmed's voice cracked with emotion. "I watched you execute my family while I hid in a closet like a coward. I was 12 years old, and I couldn't save them." Marcus had carried the weight of that night for 7 years, buried it beneath layers of duty and justification and the lie that collateral damage was sometimes necessary. But looking at Ahmed now, he saw the truth he'd been running from. He had destroyed an innocent family based on faulty intelligence and orders from men who would never face the consequences. "The intelligence was wrong," Marcus said. "Your father wasn't a terrorist. No, he was a translator for the American forces, a man who risked his life every day to help your people." Ahmed's eyes blazed with fury. "But that didn't matter to you, did it? You had your orders. You followed them without question." A new voice cut through the tension. "Actually, the intelligence was exactly what it was supposed to be." Marcus turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. A man in an expensive suit who moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to power. American, probably CIA, with the kind of face that disappeared in crowds by design. "Mr. Kane, meet Deputy Director James Crawford," Ahmed said. "The man who gave you your orders that night in Kandahar." Crawford smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Hello, Marcus. It's been a long time." Marcus felt the world shift beneath him. Crawford had been his handler for 3 years, the voice on encrypted communications who provided targets and objectives. A man Marcus had trusted implicitly. "You son of a bitch," Marcus breathed. "You knew. You knew it was the wrong house." "Of course I knew." Crawford pulled up a chair, settling in as though they were having a casual conversation. "Hassan's father wasn't just a translator. He was my asset. He'd discovered some irregularities in weapons shipments, started asking uncomfortable questions about where certain American munitions were ending up. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. You had him killed to protect an illegal arms operation. I had his family eliminated to send a message," Crawford corrected. "But you were supposed to kill everyone in that house, Marcus. You were supposed to make sure there were no witnesses." Ahmed's face contorted with rage. "He spared me because he thought I was already dead. I played dead while he checked the bodies. I heard him radio back that all targets were eliminated." Marcus remembered now, the small form hidden beneath debris, blood pooled around a motionless body. He'd assumed the child was dead and hadn't bothered to confirm. That moment of mercy had set everything that followed in motion. "For 7 years, I've been planning this revenge," Ahmed continued. "But I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone with resources, with access, with the power to manipulate government assets." He gestured toward Crawford. "Someone who had their own reasons for wanting you destroyed." Crawford nodded approvingly. "You see, Marcus, you became a liability the moment you started asking questions about your missions. Too many inconsistencies, too many civilian casualties, too many operations that didn't match official objectives. You were getting close to discovering things that could bring down entire networks." The USB drive. Marcus understood now why it contained his classified mission records. It wasn't just evidence of his operations. It was evidence of Crawford's illegal activities, documented through Marcus's unwitting participation. "So you decided to eliminate me and frame me as a rogue operator at the same time," Marcus said. "Elegant, isn't it?" Crawford stood, brushing imaginary dust from his suit. "The USB drive will surface after your death, revealing classified details about black operations that officially never happened. The media will paint you as a war criminal who went rogue and got himself killed in a foreign country. Case closed, loose ends tied up. Ahmed stepped closer to Marcus, his eyes burning with anticipation. But first, you're going to suffer. Just like you made me suffer. Just like you made my family suffer. He nodded to his men, who began wheeling in equipment that made Marcus's blood run cold. Electrical cables, medical instruments, devices designed to extract information through pain. But this wasn't about information. This was about revenge, drawn out and savored. Your daughter will watch, Ahmed said conversationally. Just like I watched. And when I'm finished with you, she'll disappear into networks that specialize in making children vanish forever. She'll spend the rest of her life wondering why her daddy couldn't save her. Rage exploded through Marcus's system like wildfire. The chains binding him groaned under the sudden strain as every muscle in his body coiled with fury. But the bonds held, and Ahmed smiled at his helpless anger. There it is, Ahmed said with satisfaction. The real Marcus Kane. The killer hiding beneath the civilized veneer. Crawford checked his watch. I need to return to Washington before my absence is noticed. Handle this cleanly, Ahmed. No evidence, no trails leading back to me. Of course. Ahmed watched Crawford leave, then turned back to Marcus with predatory anticipation. Now, where were we? But as Ahmed reached for the electrical cables, Marcus noticed something the younger man had missed in his eagerness for revenge. The chair wasn't bolted to the floor. It was welded to a steel plate that rested on the concrete. And concrete, unlike steel, could crack under sufficient pressure. Marcus began systematically testing the chair's mounting points, applying pressure at different angles while Ahmed prepared his instruments of torture. The welds were solid, but the concrete beneath showed hairline fractures from years of moisture damage. As Ahmed turned back toward him, Marcus saw something else. A reflection in a broken mirror on the wall. Emma wasn't being held in some distant location. She was here, in this building, probably just floors above. Which meant everything was about to change. Because Marcus Kane hadn't survived 20 years as a Navy SEAL by accepting defeat. He'd survived by being more ruthless than his enemies when it mattered most. And nothing had ever mattered more than this. The first jolt of electricity tore through Marcus's nervous system like liquid fire. His body convulsed against the chains, muscles seizing in uncontrollable spasms as Ahmed held the electrical probe against his ribs. But Marcus had endured SEAL training, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. He'd been broken down by experts and rebuilt himself from the fragments. Pain was just information, and information could be processed, compartmentalized, and overcome. Interesting, Ahmed observed, watching Marcus's controlled breathing pattern. Most men scream by now. But then, you're not most men, are you? Ahmed increased the voltage. Marcus's vision went white for several seconds, his entire body rigid with agony. But when the electricity stopped, he raised his head and looked directly into Ahmed's eyes. Is that all you've got? Marcus's voice was steady, almost conversational. Something flickered across Ahmed's face, uncertainty mixed with frustration. 7 years of planning, and his victim wasn't reacting the way revenge fantasies had promised. The boy who had hidden in the closet had expected the monster to beg, to break, to show the same terror his family had experienced. Instead, he was facing a man who had been professionally trained to endure exactly this kind of treatment. You killed my sister, Ahmed said, pressing the probe against Marcus's shoulder. She was 8 years old. The electricity coursed through him again, but Marcus used the pain, channeling it into focus instead of suffering. Each shock helped him map the room's electrical systems, the positioning of Ahmed's men, the structural weaknesses in his restraints. I know, Marcus said when the current stopped, and I've carried that weight every day since. Words. Just words. Ahmed's voice cracked with emotion. She used to sing lullabies to me when I couldn't sleep. She drew pictures of flowers and gave them to strangers just to make them smile. What weight could you possibly carry that compares to watching her die? Marcus looked at the young man, really looked at him, and saw not a terrorist or a kidnapper, but a broken child who had never healed from witnessing the destruction of everything he loved. "You're right," Marcus said quietly. "There's no comparison. What I carry is guilt. What you carry is loss. They're not the same thing." Ahmed paused, the electrical probe wavering in his grip. For a moment, the mask of controlled vengeance slipped, revealing the pain underneath. "But Emma is innocent," Marcus continued. "Just like your sister was. You know that. Innocence doesn't matter." Ahmed shouted, the words echoing off concrete walls. "It didn't save my family. It won't save yours." He triggered the electrical probe again, but this time Marcus was ready. As the current hit him, he used the involuntary muscle spasms to test the structural integrity of his restraints. The concrete beneath the chair's steel mounting plate showed more stress fractures than he'd initially assessed. Years of moisture had compromised the foundation. During the brief respite between electrical jolts, Marcus heard it, a faint sound from somewhere above. Emma's voice, calling for him. She was close, probably 2 floors up, and she was afraid. That sound ignited something primal in Marcus's chest. Not just anger, but a cold fury that burned like winter fire. Ahmed wanted to break him. He was about to learn what happened when you threatened a father's child. "Tell me something, Ahmed," Marcus said, his voice carrying a new edge that made 2 of the armed guards shift nervously. "In all your planning, in all your research about me, did you ever study what happens when Navy SEALs are backed into corners?" Ahmed paused, sensing the change in atmosphere, but not understanding its significance. "We don't break," Marcus continued, his eyes locking onto Ahmed's with predatory intensity. "We adapt. We overcome, and we eliminate threats to our mission." Marcus tested the chair's mounting one more time, applying torque in a specific direction while flexing his leg muscles. A hairline crack in the concrete widened slightly. Ahmed triggered the electrical probe again, but this time Marcus was ready. As the current coursed through him, he channeled every ounce of strength into a single, calculated movement. The steel mounting plate shifted, concrete fragments scattering across the floor. The chair tilted, chains straining against their anchors. Marcus heard metal stress against stone, saw Ahmed's eyes widen in alarm. "Impossible," Ahmed breathed. "You spent 7 years learning about Marcus Kane the soldier," Marcus said, applying continuous pressure to the weakening foundation. "But you never studied Marcus Kane the father." The concrete gave way with a sharp crack. The chair toppled sideways, pulling its mounting free from the floor. Marcus rolled with the momentum, using the chair's weight as a weapon as he swung toward the nearest guard. The steel chair caught the man in the knees with a sickening crunch. The guard's weapon discharged into the ceiling as he collapsed, screaming. Marcus continued the arc, the chair becoming a wrecking ball attached to his body. "Shoot him," Ahmed screamed. But the remaining guards hesitated, afraid of hitting their employer in the chaos. That hesitation cost them everything. Marcus pivoted, using the chair's momentum to build speed, and drove the steel frame into a second guard's chest. Ribs cracked like kindling. The man dropped, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. The chains binding Marcus's wrists were still intact, but now they connected him to a mobile weapon instead of a fixed anchor point. He spun again, the chair whipping through the air like a medieval flail, catching a third guard across the side of the head. Ahmed had drawn a pistol, his hands shaking as he tried to get a clear shot. But Marcus was a blur of motion, the chair spinning around him in controlled arcs that kept the remaining guards off balance. "You wanted to see the monster," Marcus growled, driving the chair into another man's solar plexus. "Here I am." The last 2 guards tried to coordinate their fire, but Marcus had already identified their positions, their weapons, their likely reactions. He feinted left, drawing their aim, then pivoted right. The chair swept both men's legs, sending them crashing to the concrete. Ahmed fired 3 shots, but panic had destroyed his accuracy. The bullets sparked off stone walls as Marcus closed the distance between them. "Please," Ahmed gasped, the pistol trembling in his grip. "I just wanted." Marcus drove the steel chair into Ahmed's gun hand. Bones snapped. The weapon clattered across the floor. Ahmed collapsed, cradling his shattered wrist, all traces of his controlled vengeance replaced by raw terror. "You wanted justice," Marcus said, standing over him with the chair still chained to his wrists. "But this was never about justice. This was about making an innocent child pay for the sins of others." Ahmed looked up at him, and for a moment, Marcus saw the 12-year-old boy who had hidden in the closet, traumatized and broken. "Emma," Ahmed whispered. She's upstairs. Second floor, room 204. "The key." He pointed toward a fallen guard. "Red key card." Marcus retrieved the key card, then looked back at Ahmed. The young man was broken, physically and emotionally, his carefully constructed revenge fantasy shattered by the reality of violence. "I'm sorry about your family," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sorry about the pain you've carried. But my daughter's innocence ends this cycle right here." Ahmed nodded weakly, tears streaming down his face. "I know. I couldn't go through with it. Even after everything, I couldn't hurt a child. Not like how his sister had been hurt." Marcus left Ahmed in the basement, unconscious but alive. The other guards would survive, though several would never walk the same way again. But Crawford, Deputy Director James Crawford, the man who had orchestrated this entire nightmare, was still walking free. That was about to change. As Marcus climbed the stairs toward his daughter, the chair still chained to his wrists like some medieval punishment device, he felt the familiar coldness settling over him. The methodical calm that preceded systematic elimination of threats. Emma first. Get her to safety. Then Crawford would learn what happened when someone threatened a Navy SEAL's family. Room 204 was a child's nightmare made real. The walls were covered with photographs, images of Marcus's family taken over months of surveillance. Emma at school, Sarah at the grocery store, Marcus himself jogging through their neighborhood. The stalking had been methodical, comprehensive, invasive in ways that made his skin crawl. But none of that mattered when he saw Emma. She was huddled in the corner, still tied to the chair, but unharmed. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. Her father, chains hanging from his wrists, blood spattering his clothes, carrying a steel chair like some medieval warrior. "Daddy." Her voice was small, uncertain. Marcus felt his carefully controlled fury melt into relief, so intense it nearly buckled his knees. "Hey, princess. I'm here. Everything's going to be okay now." He used the chair to smash the lock on Emma's restraints, then gathered her into his arms. She clung to him like a drowning person clutching a life preserver, her small body shaking with relief and residual terror. "I knew you'd come," she whispered against his chest. "I told them my daddy was a superhero and he'd save me." Marcus closed his eyes, memorizing the feeling of his daughter safe in his arms. But the moment of reunion was shattered by the sound of helicopters approaching. Multiple aircraft, heavy transport birds that meant serious personnel were incoming. Through the window, Marcus saw black helicopters settling onto the compound's grounds. Not rescue choppers. These were military transports disgorging teams of heavily armed operatives. Crawford wasn't taking any chances. "We need to go, sweetheart," Marcus told Emma, setting her down but keeping hold of her hand. "Right now." They moved toward the stairwell, but Marcus could already hear boots pounding up the steps, professional soldiers moving with tactical precision. He pulled Emma back, thinking fast. The main exits were compromised, but this was an old building with old architecture. The window. Marcus examined the frame, second story, overlooking the rear courtyard. A drop that would be manageable if he could control their descent. But first, he needed to deal with the chains still binding his wrists. "Emma, cover your ears and close your eyes," he instructed. She obeyed without question. Marcus used the steel chair to smash the chain links against the window frame's metal reinforcement. Sparks flew, metal screamed against metal, but the chains finally parted. He was free. "Okay, princess. We're going to play a game. You're going to hold on to Daddy very tight, and we're going to climb down to the ground. Can you do that?" Emma nodded, though her eyes were wide with fear. Marcus tied bed sheets together, creating a makeshift rope, then secured it to the window frame. It wouldn't hold his full weight, but it would slow their descent enough to prevent injury. The sound of boots reached their floor. Voices shouted orders in military cadence. They were out of time. Marcus lifted Emma onto his back, her arms wrapped around his neck, her legs locked around his waist. "Don't let go, no matter what," he whispered. They went out the window, just as the door to room 204 exploded inward. Marcus heard shouts of alarm, then the sharp crack of rifle fire as bullets shattered the window frame above them. He controlled their descent, using his feet against the building's wall to manage their speed. They hit the ground hard, but safe. Marcus rolled to absorb the impact, protecting Emma with his body. Above them, muzzle flashes lit up the window as Crawford's operatives fired down at them. "This way," Marcus said, pulling Emma toward the tree line that bordered the compound. But as they ran, Marcus realized something that made his blood freeze. The operatives weren't trying to kill them. Their shots were deliberately wide, designed to hurt rather than eliminate. Crawford wanted them alive, which meant this wasn't an extraction. It was another trap. They reached the forest just as floodlights blazed to life, turning night into artificial day. Marcus could hear dogs barking, tracking hounds being released. Crawford was treating this like a military operation, with multiple containment rings and coordinated pursuit teams. "Daddy, I'm scared," Emma whispered as they moved deeper into the woods. "I know, sweetheart. But remember what I taught you about camping? How we always find our way by following the stars." Emma nodded, some of her fear replaced by the familiar ritual of their father-daughter adventures. Marcus navigated by memory and training, moving through terrain that reminded him of Afghanistan's mountain regions. But he wasn't just running. He was thinking, planning, calculating. Crawford had resources, manpower, and official authorization. But Marcus had something Crawford didn't: desperation and the moral clarity that came from protecting an innocent child. His satellite phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Marcus, this is Sarah. They have me too. Crawford's people took me from the house. They're using me to force your surrender. Don't trust anyone. The corruption goes deeper than you know. Love you both." Marcus stared at the message, his heart sinking. Sarah was Crawford's insurance policy, the final piece of leverage to ensure Marcus's compliance. But something about the message felt wrong. Sarah never signed texts with "love you both." She always wrote, "love you guys," or "miss you both." Small details, but details that might mean the difference between life and death. Either the message was fake, designed to manipulate him, or Sarah was trying to send a coded warning that she was under duress. Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, there are lights behind us." Marcus looked back to see flashlight beams cutting through the forest, spread out in a search pattern that was steadily closing their escape routes. Professional pursuit tactics, they'd done this before. But as they moved deeper into the wilderness, Marcus began to notice things that didn't fit. The search teams were too well coordinated, too familiar with the terrain. This wasn't a hastily organized manhunt. This was a carefully planned operation that had been prepared in advance, which meant Crawford had always intended for Marcus to escape the compound. The basement interrogation, Ahmed's revenge fantasy, even the window escape, all of it had been theater, designed to move Marcus and Emma to exactly where Crawford wanted them. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from a number he recognized, his old commanding officer, Admiral Reynolds. "Marcus, thank God." Reynolds' voice crackled through the encrypted connection. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. There's something you need to know about Crawford." "Sir, I can't talk long. I have Emma, but we're being pursued. Listen carefully. Crawford isn't just CIA. He's been running black market weapons sales to terrorist organizations for over a decade. The Kandahar operation wasn't a mistake. It was Crawford eliminating a witness who could expose his entire network." Marcus felt puzzle pieces clicking into place. Ahmed's father discovered the weapons trafficking. Exactly. And now Crawford is trying to eliminate you for the same reason. But Marcus, there's more. Crawford has sleeper assets embedded in every major security agency. People you trust, people who've worked with you for years. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, understanding flooding through him like ice water. Crawford wasn't just covering up a single illegal operation. He was protecting an entire shadow network that had infiltrated American intelligence at the highest levels. And Marcus had stumbled into the middle of it. The sound of helicopter rotors approached from multiple directions. Spotlights swept through the forest canopy, turning the woods into a deadly maze of light and shadow. Emma pressed closer to him, and Marcus could feel her trembling. "Daddy, what are we going to do?" Marcus looked at his daughter, 8 years old, brave beyond her years, trusting him to keep her safe in a world that had suddenly revealed its capacity for casual evil. Crawford's network had resources, organization, and official sanction. They could make people disappear, rewrite history, eliminate threats with bureaucratic efficiency. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd threatened his family. And Marcus Kane had spent 20 years learning how to dismantle networks, eliminate high-value targets, and wage unconventional warfare against superior forces. Crawford wanted a hunt. Marcus would give him one. But when it was over, Crawford's network would be ash, and everyone who had participated in threatening an innocent child would face the consequences. Time to go on the offensive. The abandoned mine shaft cut into the mountainside like a wound in the earth. Marcus had found it using terrain analysis skills honed in Afghanistan's cave systems, a natural fortress that provided concealment, multiple exit routes, and defensive advantages against superior numbers. Emma huddled beside him in the darkness, wrapped in his tactical jacket, while he methodically planned the destruction of everyone who had threatened his family. 24 hours had passed since their escape from Kozlov's compound. 24 hours of cat and mouse through Montenegro's wilderness, evading search teams, drones, and thermal imaging sweeps. But Marcus wasn't just running anymore. He was preparing for war. His satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Admiral Reynolds. Crawford's network compromised at highest levels. Can't trust official channels. Sending you package via old drop protocol. Location attached. Trust no one in uniform. The coordinates led to a cache hidden in the ruins of an old monastery, 20 kilometers south of their position. Reynolds had been Marcus's commanding officer for 6 years, one of the few men in the intelligence community whose word was beyond question. If Reynolds said Crawford's corruption reached the highest levels, then Marcus was truly on his own. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Emma whispered. Marcus pulled an energy bar from his tactical pack, one of 3 remaining. Their supplies were critically low, but food was the least of their problems. Crawford's search teams were systematically clearing grid squares, using military precision to reduce their area of operations. Soon, they would have nowhere left to run, which meant it was time to stop running. "Princess, I need you to listen very carefully," Marcus said, kneeling beside Emma in the cave's darkness. "Daddy has to go away for a little while, but I'm going to leave you somewhere safe." Emma's eyes went wide with terror. "No, don't leave me. Please, Daddy, don't leave me alone. I'm not abandoning you," Marcus said firmly, pulling her close. "But there are bad men who want to hurt our family, and the only way to stop them is for me to do something very dangerous. Something I can't do if I'm worried about keeping you safe. But what if you don't come back?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. What if he didn't come back? What if Crawford's resources and preparation proved superior to one man's rage and training? Emma would be alone, orphaned, vulnerable to the same networks that specialized in making children disappear. "I'll come back," Marcus promised, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. "But if something happens to me, I need you to remember everything I've taught you about survival, about being strong, about never giving up." They moved through the night toward the monastery ruins, Marcus navigating by starlight and instinct. The building had been abandoned for decades, its stone walls crumbling under the weight of neglect and weather. But hidden beneath the altar, exactly where Reynolds had indicated, Marcus found a waterproof case containing equipment that made his pulse quicken. Military-grade explosives, encrypted communication devices, false identification documents, and something that made Marcus smile grimly, a letter of authorization bearing Admiral Reynolds' signature, granting Marcus Kane temporary reinstatement with full operational authority. It was bureaucratic sleight of hand, probably not legally binding, but it provided plausible deniability for what Marcus was about to do. If questioned later, he could claim he was operating under official orders rather than personal vendetta. The package also contained intelligence files on Crawford's network, names, locations, operational details gathered over months of careful investigation. Marcus studied the documents by infrared light, his anger building with each revelation. Crawford's corruption wasn't limited to weapons trafficking. The network had been selling classified intelligence to hostile nations, facilitating human trafficking operations, and eliminating witnesses through staged accidents and suicides. Ahmed's family had been just one casualty in a campaign of systematic murder that stretched back over a decade. But the most damning revelation was a personnel file that made Marcus's blood boil. Crawford had specifically requested Marcus for the Kandahar operation, knowing the intelligence was false, intending to use a decorated Navy SEAL as an unwitting assassin. Marcus hadn't just killed Ahmed's family by mistake. He'd been deliberately manipulated into committing murder. Marcus left Emma in a secure room within the monastery ruins, hidden behind stone walls that would provide protection from everything except direct military assault. He gave her his backup satellite phone, programmed with emergency contacts, and strict instructions to call for help if he didn't return within 12 hours. "I love you, princess," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "More than all the stars in the sky. I love you too, Daddy. Come back safe." Marcus emerged from the monastery transformed. Gone was the desperate father running through the wilderness with his child. In his place was Marcus Kane, Navy SEAL, operating with lethal precision and 20 years of combat experience. His first target was the communication relay Crawford's teams were using to coordinate their search. Located on a hillside 3 kilometers north, the relay was guarded by 4 operatives and equipped with encryption hardware that linked Crawford's field teams to command authority. Marcus approached the relay station like a wraith, using terrain features and natural concealment to remain invisible to thermal imaging. The guards were professionals, but they were looking outward, expecting threats from the forest rather than from above. Marcus descended the cliff face behind the relay station, rappelling on a rope improvised from parachute cord found in Reynolds' cache. The first guard never knew what hit him. A sleeper hold applied with surgical precision, dropping him unconscious in seconds. The second guard turned just in time to see Marcus emerge from the shadows. A single strike to the solar plexus, followed by pressure applied to the carotid artery, and the man joined his colleague in unconsciousness. The third and fourth guards were eliminated with similar efficiency. Marcus left them alive, unconscious but breathing. He was done being Crawford's unwitting assassin. But the relay equipment received no such mercy. Marcus rigged the communication array with explosives, setting a timer that would detonate the charges in 30 minutes. Long enough for him to reach his next target, short enough to prevent the guards from interfering once they regained consciousness. His satellite phone buzzed with an incoming call. Crawford's voice crackled through the encryption. "Very impressive, Mr. Kane. 4 of my best operatives neutralized without casualties. You're showing remarkable restraint for a man seeking revenge. Where's my wife?" Marcus demanded. "Safe. For now. But her continued well-being depends entirely on your cooperation." Crawford's tone was conversational, almost friendly. "I have a proposition for you. Surrender yourself and your daughter, and Sarah lives. Continue this futile resistance, and she dies." "I have a counterproposal," Marcus said. "Release my wife, disband your network, and turn yourself into proper authorities. Do that, and I'll consider letting you live long enough to face trial." Crawford laughed. "You're outnumbered 50-1, operating in hostile territory with minimal resources. What makes you think you're in any position to make demands?" "Because I've spent 20 years learning how to dismantle networks like yours," Marcus replied. "And unlike you, I don't hide behind bureaucracy and politics. I eliminate threats directly." The communication relay exploded in the distance, a pillar of fire that lit up the night sky. Crawford's laughter stopped abruptly. That was your coordination center, Marcus continued. Your field teams are now operating blind, unable to communicate with command or each other. In military terms, you've just lost operational control of the battlefield. You think destroying one relay will stop me? I have resources you can't imagine, authorization from the highest levels. You have corruption and bureaucracy, Marcus interrupted. I have explosives and a very personal motivation. Let's see which proves more effective. Marcus ended the call and began moving toward his next target. The temporary command post Crawford had established in a school building in the nearest village. Time to show Crawford's network what happened when they threatened a Navy SEAL's family. The war was just beginning. But this time, Marcus Kane wasn't following anyone else's orders. He was writing his own rules of engagement. And those rules were simple: total victory or death. Crawford's network had awakened something that should have stayed buried. Now they would face the consequences of that decision. All of them. The village school had been converted into Crawford's field headquarters, a nerve center bustling with intelligence analysts, communication specialists, and tactical coordinators. From the outside, it looked like a humanitarian operation. Inside, it was the beating heart of a conspiracy that had murdered innocent families and corrupted American intelligence for over a decade. Marcus watched the building through night vision scopes, counting personnel, identifying defensive positions, mapping entry and exit routes. 47 operatives, most of whom probably believed they were conducting legitimate counterterrorism operations. They had no idea their director was a traitor who sold state secrets to the highest bidder. But Crawford knew exactly what he was doing. Marcus's thermal imaging detected a heat signature in the building's basement, a single figure, restrained, probably female. Sarah. Crawford had kept his word about bringing her to Montenegro, though not for the reasons he'd claimed. At 0300 hours, Marcus initiated his final assault. The school's electrical system died first, plunging the building into darkness as Marcus's explosives severed the main power lines. Emergency generators kicked in seconds later, but those had been sabotaged as well. Fuel lines cut, backup batteries drained through carefully placed short circuits. Crawford's operatives found themselves operating in near-total darkness, their high-tech surveillance equipment reduced to useless weight. Marcus entered through the building's ventilation system, moving like smoke through ductwork that carried him directly over the main command center. Through metal grating, he could hear Crawford's voice shouting orders, trying to restore communications and coordinate a defense against an enemy who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Sir, we've lost contact with perimeter teams, someone reported. Thermal imaging is down across all sectors, another voice added. He's systematically dismantling our operational capacity, Crawford snarled. Fall back to defensive positions. Protect the asset in the basement at all costs. Marcus dropped from the ceiling into the main corridor, landing in perfect silence behind two guards who were fumbling with flashlights and night vision equipment that no longer functioned. A double sleeper hold eliminated both threats in seconds. He moved through the building like a ghost, neutralizing Crawford's operatives with clinical efficiency. These weren't personal enemies. They were professionals following orders from a superior they trusted. Marcus left them unconscious but alive, saving his lethal intentions for the man who had orchestrated everything. The basement door was reinforced steel, guarded by Crawford's most trusted operatives, men who knew exactly what kind of operation they were protecting. These weren't innocent soldiers following orders. These were accomplices in murder and treason. Marcus didn't show them the same mercy. The first guard turned toward a sound in the shadows and found Marcus's knife between his ribs, angled upward into his heart. Death was instantaneous and silent. The second guard managed to draw his weapon before Marcus's hands closed around his throat. A sharp twist, a wet crack, and the man collapsed like a broken doll. The third guard got off one shot before Marcus's training took over completely. Combat reflexes honed by 20 years of warfare moved faster than conscious thought. The guard's weapon was twisted from his grasp, the barrel redirected toward the ceiling as Marcus drove his elbow into the man's temple with bone-crushing force. Crawford's voice echoed from behind the steel door. "I know you're out there, Marcus. Come in. Let's finish this like civilized men." Marcus placed explosive charges against the door's hinges, stepped back, and detonated them remotely. The steel barrier crashed inward with a thunderous roar, revealing the basement command center where Crawford's true operations were conducted. The room was a monument to betrayal, walls covered with classified documents, computer screens displaying intelligence reports marked "Eyes Only," and communication equipment connected to networks that spanned the globe. This wasn't just weapons trafficking. This was systematic espionage on a scale that threatened national security. Crawford stood in the center of the room, impeccably dressed despite the chaos, a pistol in his right hand and Sarah Kane as a human shield pressed against his left side. She was alive but terrified, duct tape covering her mouth, her hands bound behind her back. "Hello, Marcus," Crawford said with the same calm demeanor he'd maintained throughout their entire confrontation. "I must admit, your performance tonight has been extraordinary. 47 operatives neutralized, my entire command structure dismantled, and you haven't suffered so much as a scratch." Marcus kept his weapon trained on Crawford, though the man's positioning made a clean shot impossible without risking Sarah's life. "Let her go," Marcus said. "This is between us." "Is it? Because from where I stand, this stopped being personal the moment you decided to wage war against a network that protects American interests around the world." Crawford's grip tightened on Sarah, making her whimper behind the tape. "Do you have any idea how many lives my operations have saved? How many terrorist attacks have been prevented by intelligence gathered through my networks? Intelligence gathered by selling weapons to the same terrorists you claim to be fighting," Marcus countered. "By murdering innocent families. By corrupting everything the uniform is supposed to represent." Crawford's facade of calm cracked slightly. "Innocent. Ahmed's father was preparing to expose operations that kept America safe. His death prevented an intelligence disaster that could have cost thousands of American lives. His death was murder. And you used me to commit it. I used a tool to accomplish a mission," Crawford spat. "That's what soldiers are, Marcus. Tools in the hands of men with vision enough to see the bigger picture." Sarah's eyes met Marcus's over Crawford's shoulder. Even with her mouth taped, even in her terror, she was trying to communicate something. Her gaze shifted meaningfully toward her bound hands, then back to Marcus. She was working on her restraints. Marcus needed to buy time. "The bigger picture? You mean the bank accounts in Switzerland? The payments from Russian oligarchs? The weapons shipments to Central American cartels? Necessary evils to maintain operational funding." Crawford's voice rose, his composure finally breaking. "Congress cuts our budgets while demanding we perform miracles. So we find alternative revenue streams. We do what's necessary to protect America from threats politicians are too weak to acknowledge." "You do what's profitable," Marcus corrected. "You've turned American intelligence into your personal criminal enterprise." Crawford raised his pistol toward Marcus. "Enough. This ends now. Drop your weapon, or I put a bullet through your wife's brain." But Sarah's hands came free at that exact moment. Years of self-defense classes kicked in as she drove her elbow backward into Crawford's solar plexus, then twisted away from his grip. Crawford's shot went wide, sparking off concrete walls. Marcus didn't miss. His bullet caught Crawford's center mass, spinning the man around and dropping him to his knees. The corrupt intelligence officer looked down at the spreading red stain on his shirt with something resembling surprise. "Impossible," Crawford wheezed. "I had authorization. I had protection from the highest levels." "You had corruption," Marcus said, approaching cautiously with his weapon still trained on Crawford. "It ends here." Crawford tried to raise his pistol one final time. Marcus's second shot ensured he never would again. Sarah tore the tape from her mouth and rushed into Marcus's arms. For a moment, they held each other in the wreckage of Crawford's command center, surrounded by evidence of treason and murder, grateful simply to be alive. "Emma," Sarah whispered. Safe. Hidden in the monastery ruins. Guarded by enough explosives to level a city block if anyone tries to hurt her. Marcus kissed his wife's forehead. It's over, Sarah. All of it. But even as he spoke, Marcus knew it wasn't truly over. Crawford's network had tentacles reaching into intelligence agencies around the world. Other corrupt officials, other criminal operations, other innocent families that might be targeted. His satellite phone buzzed with a message from Admiral Reynolds. Crawford's files recovered. Network being dismantled systematically. Justice Department moving on indictments. You did good, son. Come home. 3 days later, Marcus Kane stood in his own backyard, watching Emma play with their golden retriever while Sarah tended to her flower garden. Sunlight filtered through oak leaves, birds sang in the morning air, and the world seemed impossibly peaceful. But Marcus would never be the same man who had lived in this house before Crawford's network shattered their lives. He'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, done things that would haunt his dreams. The innocent suburban father was gone, replaced by someone harder, more dangerous. Emma ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. Daddy, you kept your promise. You came back. I'll always come back for you, princess, Marcus said, lifting her into his arms. No matter what. And he meant it. Crawford's network was destroyed, but the world was full of monsters who preyed on innocent families. If any of them ever threatened his wife and daughter again, they would discover what Marcus Kane had learned in the mountains of Montenegro. Some lines, once crossed, change you forever. Some wars never truly end. And some fathers will burn the world to protect their children. What did you think of Marcus Kane's brutal quest for vengeance? Did this Navy SEAL father's transformation from suburban dad to relentless hunter give you chills? Could you have survived what Crawford's network put this family through? Smash that like button if you're Team Marcus all the way. Drop a comment below and tell us. What was the most intense moment for you? Did Marcus go too far or not far enough? Which part had you on the edge of your seat? Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell because we've got more heart-pounding revenge stories coming your way. Stories of ordinary people pushed to their breaking point and what happens when they snap. Share this video with someone who loves intense thriller stories. But warning, they might lose sleep tonight.